Hello, I'm Robert McKay. This is Whiskey for Beginners, which is a thoroughly amateur production. How well that came out, I don't know. If you did read the title cards, you can tell that you're accurate. Thoroughly amateur production is definitely the case. What I'm going to do in this video is talk to you about my favorite whiskey in all the world. I've been drinking whiskey since September 20th of 2021. I first encountered this whiskey in December, I think on the 22nd, but anyway, in December of 2021, and I have loved it ever since. People have criticized it to me. They've told me there's a lot better out there. I've had some much more expensive whiskeys, and nothing has beat this. Only one has come close, and eventually I want to review that. I don't have it in stock right now, but this is the whiskey for me. If I could only have one whiskey, this would be it. From Balcones Distilling, and the lighting is really amateur. Let me adjust it to see if I can, well, that isn't going to help. But this is Balcones, Texas Pot Still Bourbon. In fact, let me kind of run my finger to try to help you read it. Balcones, Texas Pot Still Bourbon. That says here straight bourbon whiskey. It's from Balcones Distilling in Waco, and it's not this particular whiskey, not the bourbon, but Balcones is the original Texas whiskey. They kind of have a rivalry in that regard, I guess. Maybe I'm just seeing things that aren't there. But it seems to me there's a rivalry there between Balcones Distilling and Garrison Brothers, Balcones in Waco, Garrison Brothers in High. Garrison Brothers brags that they're the first legal bourbon distillery in Texas. But the first legal distillery is Balcones Distilling. They beat Garrison Brothers to market by a year, I think, but they did not initially produce bourbon. And so Garrison Brothers produced the first bourbon legally in Texas. I bought this bottle at Kelly Liquors at the Mountain Run Shopping Center here in Albuquerque. When did I get it? On the 1st of February. Run me $29.99, which is not a bad price. I would pay $10 or $15 more for this cheerfully. It's that good. And it has an age statement on it, aged at least 24 months in oak. And it has to have an age statement if it's a straight whiskey less than 4 years old. But Balcones seems to always put an age statement on, and they always phrase it that way, aged so and so many months in oak. It's idiosyncratic, and I like it. I don't like everything to be the same all the time, and I don't like people to use other people's words all the time. But this is a 4-grain bourbon. I don't have the proportions, but they're using Texas blue corn, Texas rye. I think the wheat is from Texas, and I think also the barley, but wheat and barley are in there as well. And I'm just going to pop the cork on this puppy. And I doubt that you could hear the cork pop. Unlike It's Bourbon Night, which I love. That's a channel I love here on YouTube. Look it up. I don't have the facilities to record the cork pop well. That'll do for a review. This is one whiskey where I typically pour more than usual. Usually I get it up to here. With the Balcones, I'd usually put it up to here. And when you fill a Glencairn glass up to the widest part, it's about 1.7 ounces. So just a little more than what the United States government considers a standard drink. The color of this stuff is a nice dark reddish gold. And I don't know if you can see the color. But for whiskey that is 4 years old or younger, at least 2 years, it has to be a straight whiskey. It's right dark, and that's the Texas climate. You could take the same juice, age it in Kentucky, and at this age it would be much lighter. And if you put it in a barrel in Scotland, it would hardly have any color at all by now. Climate makes a difference. I haven't even begun to nose this whiskey, and I can already smell it. I love this stuff because it's so bold and vibrant and emphatic. This is whiskey that comes right up to you and speaks right up. It's not shy and bashful at all. Oh, that is glorious. It's what I call the Balcones touch, and I haven't been able to take it apart and quantify everything. But there's something in Balcones whiskey, even their 100% rye, which I found undrinkable. It was so grassy. It still was distinctively Balcones. Now, there's a note that I can't figure out. I've been trying for over a year, and I can't figure it out. But I get past that note. Butter, cinnamon, smoke, vanilla and caramel, corn, and not just corn roast in ears, just slightly caramelized from the fire, roasted over an open fire. When you smell this, it's like you're sitting by a barbecue pit with mesquite wood burning, and there's the smoke here and candy here, and you got an ear of corn on your plate. It's just a whole sensory experience. There's spice in there. I think I might have mentioned cinnamon already. It's definitely there, and probably some other spices that I can't discern because I'm not familiar enough with them. Very buttery. In whiskey, we have what's called the mouthfeel, how it feels in your mouth. And it can be thin and watery, or it can be thick and creamy and viscous. It depends partly on the proof and partly on what else is in the whiskey besides simple water and alcohol, what they call the congeners that add the flavor to it. And the more flavor it is, the more likely it is to have a thicker mouthfeel. But when I smell this, it's like I'm getting a nose feel. It's that good. And when I pour my nightly glass and it's this whiskey, I have to make myself take a sip because I could just sit and smell it all night. But I do want to review it, so let me go ahead and see what it tastes like. That is delicious juice. And it's not my normal time for drinking whiskey. What time is it? It's 11:49 right now here in Albuquerque. And normally I drink my whiskey late at night after a whole day of eating and drinking and running around and all this other stuff. And so I'm not getting everything out of this that I normally would. But there's cinnamon and butter and honey, and it's got this really creamy mouthfeel. There are orange blossoms in there, and oak and smoke, and some other kind of flower, maybe roses. I have been drinking this whiskey since December of 2021, and I am still learning everything it has. I'm still digging out notes on the nose and on the taste. And it's just so good. Now, it's not your granddaddy's bourbon. And if what you're used to, and even as a beginner, you may already have begun getting used to things. If you've been drinking Kentucky bourbon and not much, if anything else, for, say, a month or two, that's what you're used to. And if that is what you're used to, this is going to be something very different. You might think it doesn't even taste like bourbon. And the thing to remember is that bourbon has certain requirements. It must be made in the United States. The mash bill must be at least 51% corn. It must age in new charred oak barrels. But those are all the legal requirements. It doesn't have to taste like Wild Turkey or Old Granddad or Maker's Mark or Woodford Reserve, any of the traditional Kentucky taste in bourbons. And this doesn't. It does not taste like those. Now, Woodford Reserve Double Oaked does remind me of this stuff. But that's because of what they do to it after it's finished aging. They finish it in a heavily toasted, lightly charred second barrel. And so it gets some flavor from that toasting that regular bourbon doesn't. Balcones bourbon has that and more. By the way, what's the proof on this? It says 46% alcohol by volume. That's 92 proof. I think in proof. So it's not a really high proof bourbon, but it's a step above the standard 80 proof stuff. Taking some more sips now. Makes me think of a See's candy store. I'm not sure what it is in there that's making me think of that. Maybe there's a chocolate note, I'm not sure. But this, although it's 92 proof, comes across to me as having less alcohol on the nose than some 80 proof bourbons. The finish is oak, heavy on the oak. I love oak in my finish. I love oak in my whiskey. That oak just lingers, and there's some spice that comes and goes, and a little honey and something floral, maybe a little citrus note. But the oak is still there. I haven't been counting seconds, if you want to go back and count. But even now, I still have that oak on my tongue. And this is the best whiskey I've ever had in my life. Now, again, I've only been drinking whiskey about 18 months, so the best whiskey in my life is not necessarily saying much. But if I could only have one whiskey, this would be it. Balcones Distilling, Waco, Texas. Turns out this juice, and if they had never done anything else, that would be sufficient in my mind for them to be a famous distillery from here till doomsday. This is good whiskey. I highly recommend it. Again, it ain't your granddaddy's bourbon. And if you're getting used to or have gotten used to the traditional Kentucky style bourbon or rye whiskey, or especially if you're used to Scotch or Irish whiskey, this is going to be very different, and you need to be prepared for that. But here's what I think. This is not necessarily a beginner's whiskey mind. But if you have never tasted whiskey and you're listening to this review, I think you could do worse than let this be your first whiskey and judge all others in comparison with this. But however you do it, I love this whiskey. If you can't tell, I love it to death. I highly recommend it. Y'all have a good one.